to Homeland Security Radio. Roger Fredinburg here, your host. Nice to be with you. While the brain-dead Americans are off at the Roman Colosseums, meandering about, being watched by facial recognition cameras so they can root for their favorite gladiators today, we're here talking about things that matter, things of great importance. After all, somebody has to do it. It might as well be us, right? Exactly. A very special day for me. A longtime friend, someone I've known for many years, is going to join us in a minute. Let me just tell you the story. I was a young budding talk show host leading into the Art Bell Show at Talk Radio Network, trying to maneuver around the various media that were available to help me enlighten folks about things that were going on. And I received from a listener in the mail a stack of magazines. The magazine title was New American Magazine. I began poring over those magazines and reading the incredible brilliance of a gentleman who you're about to meet. And I began to understand for the first time in my life what had happened to my country, what had happened to America. Ladies and gentlemen, from the John Birch Society, I very happily and very, very excitedly bring you John McManus. Hello, John.
Hello, Roger. Nice to be back on here with you.
It is a pleasure, sir, as always. I've missed you very much. Enjoy, obviously, following your work. The web has become your friend. I notice you guys are everywhere on the web now.
We do a lot. That's a lot more than we were doing, and we're grateful for the Internet and hope that it stays free.
Yeah, well, let's hope that. It's some of the videos and things you all have been putting out here lately are just, way above the call, John. Just amazing stuff, and I just want to thank you guys for your work. I know it's really kind of a thing of love that you do over there, but thank you for that. Well,
we're glad to do it. Sometimes people wonder, how can you have been in this battle as long as you have? And my attitude is I wouldn't miss this fight for anything.
Well, I mean, somebody's going to have to fight. I don't know that it seems like we're always losing ground, but we keep swimming upstream as hard as we can, But we've got some strange new characters in the game. I know you wrote a really, really interesting piece on Buckley and this whole neocon movement, and I was thinking about the other day when Colin Powell said he was going to support Barack Obama for president because Mitt Romney had some neocon ideas he didn't like, and I thought, wait a minute, isn't Colin Powell like the epitome of neoconservatism?
Yeah, in a way, you're right about that. Because he went for Barack Obama in 2008 as well. There's no real surprise here. Colin Powell is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's got all kinds of insider credentials, and that he would come out for Obama, it's no surprise to me.
Well, let me ask you a few things, because the show, what we do here, Don, now is mostly Homeland Security stuff. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Benghazi Gate incident. I know you're going to have some opinions on that. I've been trying to follow it in the news and get a sense of what it's about, and it's pretty wild stuff. Can you help me understand from your perspective what's going on? Because I'm hearing all kinds of rumors that General Ham had been fired and all these things had taken place. What are you hearing out there?
Well, what I'd like to say about Benghazi is that I'm not surprised. The so-called Arab Spring has turned into a resurgence of the Muslim militancy, and you're going to see all those countries become totally Muslim. As you may have noticed, in Egypt, the Coptic Christians are being terrorized. In Iraq, there were 1.5 million Christians. They're down to less than 500,000 now, and even those people are trying to figure out a way to leave. The Middle East is going militant Muslim, and that's not good for the world. You've got the same kind of thing happening in a country called Mali. You've got the problem in Sudan and so forth. So the Arab Spring is a conversion of relatively peaceful and legitimate governments going extreme. And the kind of extreme that they're going is the kind that brought on the attack on the Twin Towers in New York, and in fact, two attacks on the Twin Towers in New York, and then the attack on our embassy, or no, it wasn't the embassy, our legation in Benghazi. That only 4 Americans died in that attack is, I think, kind of a surprise. I would have guessed that any attack of that sort would have gone into many more casualties. But the interesting thing about it, and probably what you want to talk about, is the fact that it took the administration quite a while to finally label this as a terrorist attack rather than a demonstration that got out of hand.
Well, this is an administration who, thinks that shaking down 84-year-old grandmas from Indianapolis named Gertrude Frankenstein or something is saving the country from a terror attack. So,
well, they shake me down at airports all the time, too, and I really resent it. There's not much I can do about it at this point except to try to get my congressman and some other congressmen to say, hey, there's enough of this. What they should do is what other countries have done, and that is turn the inspections at airports over to private entities. Let each airline be responsible for their own safety of their passengers, and it would be a lot less intrusive and a lot less costly, by the way.
Right.
Well, they're up over 100,000 employees now in the TSA, I think, aren't they?
Well, I mean, at least I know the taxpayers apparently can afford it, or at least we have the creditworthiness to borrow the money from somebody else to afford it, it appears.
That's part of the problem. Now, I should tell you that when I go on radio shows in recent times, I'm frequently asked, what do I think is the greatest problem facing our country? And my response is the destruction of the dollar. I don't like what's happening in foreign affairs. I don't like what's happening in domestic affairs in a lot of cases. But I think the greatest threat to the independence, sovereignty of our country and the freedom of the American people is what the Federal Reserve and its partners in government are doing to our currency.
Well, John, explain to the audience, how does the current attack on the dollar by the Federal Reserve and the centralized banking community affect national security?
One of the solutions being offered to the decline of the value of the dollar, and realize it's gone from 100 cents in 1913 when the Federal Reserve started to less than 2 cents today. One of the solutions being offered to that is to go to the United Nations International Monetary Fund and start using special drawing rights, which they produce. That would mean an end to the sovereignty of our country, and that would end ultimately in the loss of freedom to all of our people. There are a lot of people who scoff at the United Nations and say, well, it's just a bunch of blather, it's a bunch of people getting up and bloviating or something like that. Not at all. The United Nations continues to amass power and has its tentacles into every aspect of our life. And the American people got to realize this. And I think more are realizing that the old John Birch Society slogan, get us out of the United Nations, makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think that there's more support for that now than there's ever been in Congress.
Yeah, I can give you a statistic on that. It has long been recognized that a vote to defund the United States dues paying to the United Nations has always been looked upon as, well, that means you want to get out of the United Nations. So in February of 2011, at the start of the current Congress that is about to expire, and it will go out on December 31st, there was a vote to stop paying dues to the United Nations. And 177 members of the House of Representatives voted for it. That's about double what had ever been voted before for that very same topic. So it's encouraging. And that 177 would take a stand like that means that they know that the people back home aren't going to lynch them for doing so. So we're headed in the right direction, but I'm always in a hurry. I would like to see it done tomorrow. But it's not going to happen. We'll see what happens when the new Congress convenes in January of 2013. I hope that there are a lot more people who are elected to Congress who want very much to have us sever our ties to the United Nations.
Well, I worry about the American public, John, and their ability to comprehend complex topics. And you know, this has always been a problem. But I think the larger picture for me is I'm sitting here kind of distanced from politics now. I've been, the last several years, kind of just stayed out of politics and just, you know, built my business and worked on other things. I just got tired of the fight, but I'm starting to get, you know, interested again.
Good.
But when I look at the American populace and I see that more than half of the people potentially would vote for Barack Obama for a second term, or at least the polling data suggests that he's still pretty strong out there with the American public, it just leads me to question just the basic intelligence of my fellow man. Am I missing something?
No, well, I don't blame the intelligence of the people as much as I blame the terrible educational process that they've gone through. I've made a habit in recent months when I'm out with some Birchers having dinner. I don't do this with my wife because she gets upset at me. But I'll ask the waitress. I'll say, I have a question for you. Maybe you can answer this. Who did our government fight? Who did our country fight in World War II? That's pretty basic. And I would say that 2/3 to 3/4 of the waitresses that I have asked that had absolutely no clue. Not even close. Now, if you ask them a constitutional question, they might say to you, what's the Constitution? You know? It's that bad. These people go to school, they go to high school, they go to college. Some of the waitresses I've asked were in summer jobs in between semesters at a university somewhere.
All right, hold on right there. We'll be back with John McManus from the John Birch Society. It's the Homeland Security Radio Show. Don't go away. It is Homeland Security Radio. I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host. A pleasure to be here. An absolute wonderful afternoon. A great afternoon to not be a football fan, let me tell you. Our guest today is John McManus from the John Birch Society, one of the finest patriotic men I've ever met in my life. John, nice to have you here with us.
You're very kind. You keep throwing bouquets.
Listen, you know, I've never joined anything in my life, and I told my wife when she scheduled this show, I said, you know, I think I'm going to join the John Birch Society. I've never joined anything in my life because I just never felt like anything was worthy of me joining it. I know that sounds a little selfish, but I just never did.
Well, you know, we've frequently said that the Birch Society is an organization for non-joiners. Many of our members haven't joined anything else except maybe a church. So it's not unusual that people who are not joiners might find themselves interested in the John Birch Society. Well, you
email me over the paperwork, and I want to figure out what I have to do to get involved. But let me talk to you about some of the reasoning why. I grew up in Oregon, Southern Oregon. Was born and raised in probably maybe the most liberal city in America, a little place called Ashland, Oregon, home of the Shakespearean Festival, and now Southern Oregon University, used to be Southern Oregon College. And it's a bastion of retired UN and ultra-liberal organization people. I don't know why this town attracts them, but it always has. And it is just a nightmare. I had to leave the town because I literally would find myself wanting to, commit crimes of a heinous nature every time I went through the community. I want to choke people, And I look at my state of Oregon and I see that the when I was growing up as a kid, along the Oregon and Northern California coast, we had lots of fisheries and marinas and canneries, and we had just an unimaginable amount of activity going on in the forests with, natural resource development industries like timber and such. And all of that is gone now. And there's nothing here but government Forest Service jobs and just a bunch of make-believe, phony baloney work. I mean, nothing of real substance is here anymore. And I don't know how you can have an economy based on this fraud. And so I see people accepting and settling for a very minimalist lifestyle with no hope of any kind of entrepreneurial opportunity in the community, really. I mean, there's not even a restaurant here worthy of going to most of the time, okay? Terrible place to live. But this is happening across the country. Rural America has been decimated by these green Nazi crackpots, I call them. And I'm on the John Birch Society website the other day, and I see Agenda 21 there. And I realize that you're one of the few organizations out there who get how dangerous these UN environmental regulations are and how they've affected energy policy and the cost of fuel and the cost of heating and the cost of electricity and the cost of farming and bringing food to the marketplace. How bad is it, John?
Well, let's put it this way. We'll probably have to explain what Agenda 21 is to your audience, or maybe you've already done that. But
no, go ahead.
Well, I want to say that Agenda 21 is a stealth operation conducted by the United Nations to get communities through their city councils, their local government agencies, even county agencies, to buy into United Nations direction of the way they do things in the name of environmentalism. They will have people go to a community and they will have people supply all kinds of money. We have funding for you if you will start this green project, if you will start this sustainable energy policy or sustainable growth policy or something like that. They have so many different names for it, it's hard to imagine. And so a lot of communities have done this. Well, the John Birch Society finally decided to blow the whistle on this about less than 2 years ago, and there have been 150 communities out of the 600 and some odd that have signed on to this with the United Nations that have now pulled out of it because they finally got some information from somebody who knew something about what this was all about and how dangerous it was. If you go through some of the literature published by the Agenda 21 promoters, they do so with an organization called ICLEI. International Council on...
Yes, ICLEI. Hold on a second, John. We've got to take the break here. John McManus here on Homeland Security Radio. I'm Roger Fredinburg. I'll give out phone numbers later if people want to call in. Right now, just hang by the radio dial and listen in. We'll be back. Don't go away. It is Homeland Security Radio. Hello, Roger Fredinburg, your host. Kind of excited today. I've got an awesome guest online with us. John McManus from the John Birch Society is here, talking about Agenda 21 and this ICLEI. John was about to explain ICLEI. If you want to call in, the phone number is 800-259-5791, 800-259-5791. But please try to keep it on topic here. We don't want to drag John off in 1,000 directions. Welcome back, John.
Thank you. Good to be back.
The ICLEI, International Conference of...
Council.
International Council of Lunatics and Imbeciles, right? Or something like that?
No. Well, first of all, Agenda 21 grew out of the Rio Conference in 1992. That it was a part of their drive for what they call sustainable development. And the 21 part of it doesn't mean that there's a 20 and a 19 and an 18 and so forth. The 21 is to have this thing in place during the 21st century. So they had long-range planning, and it started fairly slowly, but it gathered momentum such that our people began to notice it in communities, and our own people suggested that the society take this up as a project, and so we did. And it wasn't shortly after we did that communities started pulling out of this. When some of our people went down with our pamphlets and information, we even had to have a DVD about the subject, and local governments began to pull out. So there was an article, a front-page article in the New York Times, probably 6 or 8 months ago, talking about the fact that the crazies and the wackos and the screwballs are at it again. They're now attacking the United Nations program called Agenda 21, and it's being led by the John Birch Society.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. Well, we take that as a compliment, you know. We get to attract attention from those people.
The badge of honor.
They just came out today, Sunday, with a long editorial backing Barack Obama for President of the United States, second term, which is no surprise. But
you know, these people are so far, I mean, I call it the watermelon cult, you know, green on the outside, commie red in the middle.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, I guess, because that's what it really is.
They just make me nuts. Go ahead, John.
Well, they put out a book not too long ago, which is the Agenda 21, and it's a big, thick book, and it's got all the different kinds of proposals that they're going to have, this sustainable development and green this and something else that and so on. But the foreword to the book is written by an editor, a man named Sitarz, Sitarz, and he's very much in favor of all of this. So I want to read to you what he said right at the beginning of the book. And you and your audience will get an idea that you already probably have an idea of what it is. It says, Agenda 21 proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on Earth. It calls for specific changes in the activities of all people. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals. It goes on to say, there are specific actions which are intended to be undertaken by multinational corporations and entrepreneurs, by financial institutions and individual investors, by high-tech companies and indigenous people, by workers and labor unions, by farmers and consumers, by students and schools, by governments and legislators, by scientists, by women, by children, in short, every person on Earth. And that's what the United Nations is after. That's what they're after with this particular program and so many others that they also have. And it's time to get out of the United Nations. That would be a blow that would set back a conspiratorial design on the freedom of the people of this earth. It would set them back a generation and maybe even kill the whole conspiracy. That's what we're after in the John Birch situation.
John, here's my greatest concern about all of these things, and it isn't even about my politics, which obviously are part of my ultimate worldview, but generally speaking, the United States government, this union of states, this 50 states that came together under this federalist flag, you know, the point of this thing is to defend the country against invasions, against assaults, against attacks, right?
Well,
isn't this a form of an invasion?
It is. It is, much like the illegal invasion from Mexico. Constitution of the United States calls on the federal government to protect the United States against invasion. And it didn't say military invasion. So
no, I mean, there's nothing more invasive than something that comes in and tries to overthrow your government and your entire way of being and living.
Exactly. That's what this is.
And that's why I think it's the greatest threat. I think it's far worse a threat than Sharia law and the Islamists, because I think ultimately Americans are going to catch on to that and have a really loud conversation with these people. But this green stuff comes in as your friend. You want clean air and water, don't you?
Yeah, that's why
you don't want to sit around in your own dirty diaper, do you?
Well, it's what it's saying is that the people of the United States aren't already interested in that and are doing it at the local level, because they are. People don't die in the United States from drinking bad water. People don't get sick from drinking bad water. We have good water. We have relatively good cleanliness throughout the country, probably more so than any place on earth. We don't need the United Nations to tell us. The United Nations isn't really interested in that as much as it is in gaining power over communities and having the communities then do the will of the United Nations.
All right, let's take a call. We're going to go out to California. David has a question or comment on Agenda 21. David, hello.
Yeah, how are you? You know, I couldn't disagree with you more. Agenda 21 was designed to stop pollution across international boundaries. I mean, this has been a problem for tens of thousands of years. Basically, you know, they were polluting back in before Jesus' day. They were, you know, the Pharaoh was digging up stuff and sending it downstream. Bernard Baruch was writing about this back in the 1950s about the pollution problems of Egypt. So when I hear you talking about protecting the polluters and claiming that it's a conspiracy to put a stop to pollution, you know, I just have to remind the listeners that the John Birch Society was founded by the Koch brothers, and the Koch brothers are some of the biggest polluters in the world. The Koch brothers own mining companies.
Stop right there. The John Birch Society was not founded by the Koch brothers.
Oh,
secondly,
we are not by their dad then, right?
We are not interested in protecting the polluters. Their dad was one of the 11 men that was at the founding meeting of the John Birch Society. The Birch Society was founded by a man named Robert Welch.
And by the way, tell the people who John Birch was. Because
John
he
Birch
was dead by the time they took a name of a famous hero and abused it, and they've been abusing it for years.
With the parents' permission. I happen to
meet... And John Birch, you know, don't deny that his name hasn't been abused for all of these years. He was a hero, and he had nothing to do with protecting pollution.
All right, David. I thank you very much, David. I don't think that's the subject we're on, but you know, if you want to write the Birch Society and bash the Birch Society, go ahead. But I'm not going to do it here. See, John, here's the problem: is the disinformation that's out there about the Birch Society or about. I mean, here's a guy who's going to defend a bunch of communists coming in and taking over every small town in America, probably because you know, he's afraid somebody will interfere with his disability check or something.
I don't know. I don't know what his motive is, but he's dead wrong about many things that he said right there.
That's what I'm saying. Disinformation. And you know what? How I see this, John, is death by 1,000 cuts.
Okay.
You know, it's a little bit here with Agenda 21, and it's a little bit here with the international banking communities and indebtedness, and we're borrowing a little from China, and we're borrowing a little from Europe, and we're giving back a little bit on Islam, and we're giving back a little bit on the Mexican border, and, you know, it's just one thing after another snowballing, and all of it working against the security of my nation.
That's right. Robert Welch, who founded the John Birch Society, always taught us that what's going on is what is called patient gradualism. Gradualism toward a one-world tyranny. The man who called here, he's so wrong about so many things. He must not have heard me when I read what these people have said in their own book called Agenda 21. The specific actions which are intended to be undertaken by every person on earth, compelled to take action by every person on earth. And that's what it's leading to, and it has to be stopped. For him to say that we're in favor of the polluters is absolutely absurd, and it's quite an insult.
Well, first of all, to have an economy, you're going to have to utilize natural resources and develop natural resources, whether it's agriculture and farming or whether it's, you know, digging ore out of the earth to get metals and minerals, whether it's harvesting renewable resources like timber. You're going to have some effect on natural resources to derive any genuine wealth.
Right.
We can't, you know, wealth does not come from, you know, some nasally thin air impersonation, in some twisted reality. You have to do something with the earth to have wealth. And there are people out there who don't believe that we have a creator powerful enough to provide enough for all, but I believe that our creator was smarter than the rest of us. So I just think that this is ludicrous to say that because someone wants to go out and cut trees down to build homes that are replantable and you can grow them back in most cases. I can take you to third growth forests that'll blow your mind that look far nicer than the protected old growth forests. People just don't understand these things. They've been brainwashed. They've been dumbed down. They've been misinformed. A lot of disinformation out there.
Just on the subject of forests, I've seen photographs of forests that were owned by somebody where they were replanting after harvesting trees, and then photos nearby that were government lands. And the difference between the cleanliness and the care in the one and the absence of care and making it a dangerous potential for a forest fire, it's enormous.
John, I give you a classic example of that after this break when we come back. Hey, it's wonderful to have John McManus from the John Birch Society here on the Homeland Security Radio Show. I'm Roger Fredinburg. You can call us at 800-259-5791. Don't go away. It is Homeland Security Radio. Roger Fredinburg, your host. John McManus is here. Let me read something from Kelly Nelson's article dated August 30th, 2011, appearing in the News with Views website, newswithviews.com. In that article, Kelly says this: I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to speak to John McManus, the president of the John Birch Society, for 90 minutes by phone. It was a personal and private conversation that I will never release. However, Mr. McManus explained thoroughly to me the various rumors and innuendos that had been circulating from the very beginning of the JBS and his frustration with trying to quell them. I found him to be totally forthright and honest, as well as being a total gentleman. When I asked some very hard questions, blah, blah, blah. In other words, she and I was privileged to be in on that conversation, to listen in. And I tell you, John, to know that you were, so able to overcome all of these innuendos and these lies about the John Birch Society, if people just, give it 5 minutes and quit listening to all the disinformation out there. And I just want to say that because it's very important. People can read all about it. Just look up Kelly Nelson, Kelleigh, Nelson, Nelson, Kelly Nelson and John Birch on Google, and it'll pop up and you can read about it anyway. Let's put that.
I was very glad to be able to be on with her to settle her mind about the Birch Society. She had some pretty penetrating questions, but I doubt that she asked me anything I hadn't been asked before. And it's quite easy to explain the Birch Society and to put down a lot of the nasty rumors that have been stated about us.
Well, that's what they do, though, John. They demonize anyone who disagrees with the status quo, anyone who won't go along with this new socialist agenda. Or communist. I think it's really sick. It's a demented form of communism, really. And I'm really interested. I was watching the other night on television a program about gold miners in Africa, right? And there were the Chinese there, just kind of running across the landscape with no restraints and armed and willing to kill anyone that gets in their path as they're over there stripping the gold in parts of Africa. And some American miners that went there to try to figure out how they could make a living and the threats that they faced. And I got thinking, we owe China this immeasurable debt. It's an unimaginable amount of money. What happens when they call home, the collateral? I mean, is that why we've got our resources locked up? Is this collateral for them, for the debt, do you think? Is that possible?
Well, it's possible. We can lose our sovereignty through debt. You can lose your sovereignty through an invasion of armed might, but you can also lose it through indebtedness. And the indebtedness of the United States is second to none in the history of mankind. We owe $16 trillion that they admit, but if you add to it the unfunded obligations to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, so on, you're talking well over $100 trillion, and an incomprehensible amount of money. And here we have...
And again, that's a Homeland Security threat.
Absolutely a Homeland Security threat. There are many Homeland Security threats far beyond a terrorist trying to throw a hand grenade into your city council or anything like that.
Right, and the reason for this show in part is to try and awaken people to the fact that a lot of these things that they think of as political endeavors or political events are actually Homeland Security issues. They're about the very survival of this nation.
Well, one of the Homeland Security issues that I like to talk about is to promote the idea of retaining local police free from and totally independent of federal government control. There are several moves that have been on the way over the years to federalize police forces. A federalized police force in the German language is called Gestapo. We don't want a federal police force. And there have been many, many ways of trying to go about this, mostly through funding local police forces, that we've been able to stop and to warn people about. Don't get yourself beholden to federal controls. We tell that to police chiefs. We tell that to city councils not to let the local police go anywhere. Stop and think now. If a bunch of United Nations officials coming down the street with their blue helmets and so forth, wouldn't that alarm every American? Wouldn't it say to every American, it's time to get involved, that maybe it's too late, but we should get involved, we should try to do something?
One could hope. Hang on, we've got to take the break. I see you up there, Rod, in Washington. If you'll hang on to the break, we'll get you on the other side. John McManus here on Homeland Security Radio. I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host. Don't go away. All right, it's Homeland Security Radio. I am Roger Fredinburg, your host. This is a radio show that's dedicated to exposing the truth about what is absolutely dangerous to our country. All of the elements, all of the things, not just Alibaba and his 40 dweebs who want to hurl, TNT at you in your sleep. But I'm talking about all the real major threats that are being driven by global government forces. You know, an example is in today's modern age, you go down and you get your driver's license. They take your photograph. One of my friends inside the Homeland Security Department tells me that your facial dimensions are registered like a footprint or a thumbprint or a fingerprint. And those dimensions for your face go into a federal database. And then anywhere you go where you're on camera for the rest of your life, they know you by the dimensions of your face, by these specific little measurements that they take when you get your driver's license photo. You don't even know these things are happening to you because you don't care, most of you. You'd rather watch football. Well, I'm here to wake you up, those of you I can. Joining us here today is one of the finest patriots in America, in my view. His name is John McManus. He heads up the John Birch Society. Hello, John.
I'm here. Yes, I am.
Just accept the applause, John. I want to ask. We've got to go to Rod. He's hanging on, but I got to ask you to elaborate a little bit on this local police thing, because I see these fusion centers and these joint task force and all of this, influence from the federal government and global governments and Interpol. I mean, a lot of police squad cars now have Interpol computers in them. What are you talking about, the local police? What's going on?
Well, I want the local police stay local. I want them to be known by the people in the community. I want them to know the people in the community. And I can't imagine that there would be a better situation than that if some government agency came and said, well, we want you to go and pick up this guy. He's a troublemaker. The local police would know better. And we don't want to see that happen. Every country that has been taken over by communists or some sort of dictatorship has always had a national police force. You can call it the KGB or the NKVD in the Soviet Union. You can call it the Chinese Protective Agency. You can call it the Gestapo. You can call it anything. it's all the same. Police power should remain locally controlled, and when it is, it will do its job of keeping the community safe. So what the federal government of the United States has begun doing is to send money into a community, say, oh, we'll buy you all kinds of equipment, we'll buy you all kinds of this and that, and then you'll have to take orders from us. They've also got a new project, I should say, and the new project is to go to an area and form a regional police force. So you'll have 6 or 7 or maybe fewer communities give up their local police powers, and all of a sudden now it's a county-wide thing, or it's even more than a county, and people are losing their control over the local police. Our long-standing program, Support Your Local Police and Keep Them Independent, is something that has forestalled a lot of this kind of consolidation, and we want to continue to do that. We want people to be aware of the threat of nationalizing or federalizing police powers.
Well, but they can still come in and demonize the daylights out of somebody like David Koresh and his religious group in Waco, Texas, or Randy Weaver, high atop, the mountains of Idaho and Ruby Ridge.
Federal crimes, in my view, in both cases. The local police in Waco, Texas, had no problem with David Koresh, but the feds did. And the feds had problems with Randy Weaver. It was a federal sniper that killed him, killed his wife and his son. So,
Ron Horiuchi. Never forget the name.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Rod up in Washington, Spokane. Rod, you're on the radio with John McManus. Hello.
Mr. McManus, I have heard you before, sir, and congratulations on being on Mr. Fredinburg show.
Well, thank you very much.
You are a patriot, sir. And let me extend your last comment about Weaver and Koresh. In both cases, they were a setup. The feds could have arrested Koresh any day of the week when he was out jogging, and that's never been brought out as it should have been by the media. And in the cases of Weaver, they kept begging him to cut a shotgun off. Why he was dumb enough to do it, I don't know, but he didn't cut it off where they said, and they kept coming back, and it's a long story, and I didn't call for that.
Okay,
number one, as Roger can tell you, I'm old enough to be his grandfather, and
I probably am as well.
But I've been around I've never been a member of the John Birch Society. That's the disclaimer up front here.
Oh, you're one of those kids of people that are cheating us out of dues.
Well, that could well be. A good friend of mine just passed away who was one of your top people, Cliff Wassam. Oh,
Cliff Wassam, I knew him well. We miss him. Yes.
Yep.
He had a large store, started out as a drugstore, became a little bit of a, department store of some kind there in Clarkston, Washington.
Yeah, well, it's the only place in the eastern Washington you can buy a Hasselblad camera. That should tell you a little bit about the quality of the man.
Oh, yeah, he was a good fella.
Yeah, but in all the years that I've known the John Birch Society, I have never seen a lawsuit against you people for libel.
No.
That ought to tell the public something.
Well, we've stayed out of court. We've been threatened with a lot of that stuff, and they say, well, go ahead, sue us. You don't have a case, and we talk people out of it before they do that. But we were once
my point being is
by the Federal Election Commission, and defending ourselves from being a political organization and backing candidates, which we don't do. And amazingly, the case was heard by a 9-judge federal panel in New York City, and it was unanimously ruled in our favor. We did not violate any Federal Election Commission. We don't think there should be a Federal Election Commission to begin with, but we know that we have to go along with the power that they've taken. So we spent a lot of money defending ourselves from the charges that these people were laying against us, and we won 9-0.
Well, my point being is I was unaware of that case, but if you guys were so awfully bad, there would have been suit after suit, and there's not been. The second comment I wanted to make about the Agenda 21 is that I have never known a family farmer or a fisherman family or a logger or a miner who would screw up what they were about to leave to their next generation.
Exactly.
Every time I have seen that sort of activity, it's been either multinational corporations or the government itself that did it. And I can tell you out here just west of me, they've already got it planned out that there will be there will be a straight freeway from Spokane to the base of the Cascade Mountains by Seattle, with no off-ramps except for federal government off-ramps, and all that land, that productive wheat land, especially the irrigated land that was brought out under Roosevelt with the Grand Coulee Project, all that they plan to return back to native grasses. Then they're crying that the world can't get fed.
Well, the goals of the Agenda 21 program are absolutely enormous. And, to even mention some of them, for instance, they want a lot of the land in the United States to go to wilderness. And they want to force people back into cities where they won't have automobiles, and so that will supposedly cut down on pollution. That will be impacting the global warming that doesn't exist because of man's activity at all. It's another subject to get into, but what these people have in mind is draconian, and it's got to be stopped. And happily, when we get some of our information into the hands of local officials, city officials, county officials, city governments, and so forth, a lot of these people are beginning to shake their head and say, well, we made a mistake getting involved in this. Let's get out. And I think a lot more of them would want to get out, except they've already taken some money from these people. So I think they're going to end up having to pay them back and say, leave us alone. We'll take care of our own problems right here.
Yeah, when I was in college, I read a book for a writing class titled The Maine Woods, written by Henry Thoreau. Fabulous book. I recommend it highly. People don't read good books these days, but if you want a good one, The Maine Woods by Thoreau. But it's interesting that in Maine, which are famous for their North Woods, some of the most beautiful forests in the world, and 95% of the forest lands in Maine, which now produce 39 wood products and have a vibrant timber industry, are privately held. The land of Maine, the forests of Maine, are all in private ownership, versus out in the Northwest where the government owns 70, 80, 90% of the forests.
Well, the federal government owns more than 50% of the land in all of the 13 western states, and it gets up to the 95% in the state of Alaska. And there's no constitutional authority for that. The federal government...
That's right. But my point is, if you look at the management and the beauty and the luster of the forest, the Maine woods, the woods of Maine, are far more pristine and beautiful than those in Oregon, I promise you.
And
because they're managed.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they produce a lot more usable products than does some of the federally owned lands.
Out here in the Northwest, where Rod and I are, you can't even go out in the forest in most cases. Now they've got the roads blocked, either with boulders or berms or gates. They've got to shut out. They let the forest fires run amok. They're when I was a kid, you grew up, they had a no pets sign in the park. Now it's no people in the woods signs, No,
from no pets to no people. Huh?
Yeah, and it's just horrible because
they protect the wolves in Montana.
Yeah, but what do they preserve? When I get with these Agenda 21 people and they say we got to save this for future generations, and I said, well, if they're not going to get any more enjoyment out of them than I'm getting out of them, screw it. Why save them at all?
Well, it's all a lot of propaganda to get people to think that there's no other alternative. And
but what are they saving them for? Are they going to develop natural resources later? I'm trying to figure out what they're saving them for.
Years ago, Roger, I found some statistics that were believable, and it said that in the last 25 years, the United States has gone from 20 million people in manufacturing down to 13 and continues to shrink. And your point earlier in the program about wealth is productivity, taking the raw materials of the earth and fashioning them into goods. That's what makes a country wealthy.
All right, hang on. Got to take the break. John McManus here. Thank you for the call, Rod. We'll be right back. Homeland Security Radio, I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host, and you can call 800-259-5791 if you want to get in on the conversation. All right, welcome back. Homeland Security Radio. Roger Fredinburg, your host. Many of you don't realize how many things actually play into this concept of Homeland Security. A lot of folks think it's just about terrorism and looking for strange guys in funny hats that go bump in the dark, but that is further from the truth than you think. Joining us here today is a champion for security for this country, a gentleman who's spent most of his adult life fighting for our safety and security by exposing and educating and helping people understand the many issues that we need to be focused on if we're going to save this country. John McManus from the John Birch Society is here. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, my pleasure, Roger. It's nice to be back on the air with you after a few years.
Yeah, well, I needed to come back and do something. I was getting restless in my, I'm over 50 now, so I guess it's time for me to get serious again.
There you go.
I want to ask you about something I keep hearing in this election, and I know you have to be careful about politics, but it's an important topic. I keep hearing Mitt Romney talk about how he's going to open free trade agreements. Now, we go back to NAFTA and GATT, the WTO, and, some of the original legislation that came through that I think has been harmful to America. Not helpful at all, especially as we were talking before the break about taking raw materials and developing them into products for a marketplace that creates wealth and opportunity for people. How are these trade agreements affecting the country?
Well, one of the very important ones, of course, was NAFTA. And NAFTA was enacted in 1994. It has cost several million jobs. I'm looking for a figure now. I just wrote something about this subject, and it has cost the jobs of millions of Americans, has opened up the borders even wider than they were open.
I mean, because they talk about it as the great panacea of the Clinton years.
That's right. 1994, Clinton was president. He was very much in favor of it, of course, and here, NAFTA's record confirms the U.S. Department of Labor reported 1.8 million American workers had applied for trade adjustment assistance after losing their jobs because of NAFTA. Countless U.S. factories have been closed and rebuilt in Mexico, and some of these eventually wound up in China. U.S. manufacturing base has shrunk dramatically, while some experts continue to suggest that our nation should become a mere service provider, not a wealth producer. Our nation's southern border remains open, and then we even have rulings from NAFTA's judicial panels, created by NAFTA's Chapter 11, that have overturned state and federal court rulings. This is all part of the record of NAFTA. Now, what happened is NAFTA was such a success for the world government promoters that they then promoted the free trade area of the Americas, 34 nations instead of just 3 in NAFTA. And the John Birch Society went to work on that and stopped it cold. It never did go anywhere. So now they're back with a new proposal. They want to start the North American Union, which would be uniting Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Anybody in the United States who's a couple of decades old or older would know that Americans and Canadians have dealt with each other across a wide-open border for hundreds of years. We don't need a North American Union to help spur trade between Canada and the United States. So what is the North American Union really all about? It's about a step towards a similar type union for the rest of the Western Hemisphere on the way to world government. That's what it's all about. And the North American Union, very dangerous proposal. I was talking to some Canadians recently, and they have a publication, and I told them I've just given a speech on this subject. Please send us a copy of your speech. We want to publish it in Canada. So I've done it. And I'm glad to have that kind of an ally.
Well, the media never challenges anybody. When I hear, I have in this political race, I think that Karl Marx would be a better choice than either of the two guys that are up for election, honestly, but that's just an opinion.
Well, on that point, let me make a point here. The Federal Reserve has come under attack, finally. We have to thank Congressman Ron Paul for bringing the attention of the American people up on this subject. At the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto, I'm reaching for it here, it actually says that they wanted to have, I'll read it exactly.
All right, well, hold on until we come back from the break. John McManus is with us here on the Homeland Security Radio Show. I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host. We will entertain calls if you want to call in at 800-259-5791. Do not go away. All right, it is Homeland Security Radio. John McManus from the John Birch Society is with us. John, if people want to know more about the John Birch Society, what should they do?
They should go to the Internet. Just go to jbs.org, JBS for John Birch Society. Anybody who wants to telephone us can do so, 1-800-USA. What is it? I forgot the number. It'll come to me in a minute here.
All right. Well, you can give it out when it comes, I guess.
I'm having a senior moment. I wanted to mention about the Communist Manifesto. All right, the plank 5 says centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. That's the Federal Reserve System, except that we have outmarched Marx in this country. The Federal Reserve that we have is not in the hands of the government, the state. It's in private hands. And part of what we've been backing resolutions to audit the Fed and so forth is to find out who really does own the Federal Reserve. We don't know. If you go to Washington, D.C., and you pick up the big, thick phone book in your motel room or hotel room, and you look, you'll see that most of it, or half of it, is blue pages, and that's all the federal agencies. The other beginning part of it is the white pages, and that's the people and the local entrepreneurs, businesses, and so forth. Now, you look in those blue pages, and you will not find the Federal Reserve. It is not a government agency. Now, most people have no appreciation of that at all. If you go to the Communist Manifesto, you will find that there are 10 planks, 10 important goals of communists. If you accomplish implementing all of those 10, you will have control of the country. All 10 are partially or fully in place in the United States today, and it all happened in the 20th century. Number 2 is the heavy progressive income tax. Number 3 is the abolition of the rights of inheritance. That's not totally done, it's partially done. Number 10, free education for all children in public schools, government schools. And the Federal Reserve that I just mentioned. All of these are part of the way to communize or socialize a country. You have to remember that the Communist Manifesto is the so-called Bible, not only of communists, but of all socialists. And the great foe of the United States for many years was the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I'll never forget being asked by a talk show host in San Francisco one time, well, what's the difference between a communist and a socialist? And I said simply, a communist is a socialist in a hurry. And he just lost it. He said, that is so well put. And it's something I've been saying for years.
Yes.
So communism and socialism are two roots, two peas in the same pot, I guess we could say. And that's what's happening to our country. And it's happening by Democrats and by Republicans.
Yeah, but it seems that some people wear it as a badge of honor now, John.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, there was a time when if somebody accused you of being a communist, and we'll go back to Joseph McCarthy, who I think has well been vindicated 1,000 times over now, but in those marked times in American history, the very thought of someone being called a communist was reprehensible.
That's right.
I mean, there was a stigma attached to it that brought shame and a lack of trust by your fellow people in the community. Now it's like, is that something that comes after your first tattoo? Or, I mean,
there's something else that's happened, too, and that is that a lot of people think communism is dead, that there aren't any communists anymore. And what happened in Europe and certainly in Russia was that the communists all said, oh, no, we're not communists, we're now socialists. And some people think socialism is sociability, and it's not. It's a lot different.
Well, we saw this Wall Street attack, this movement of these people, the 1%ers, 99%ers, whatever they call themselves.
That's the Occupy movement.
Yeah, the Occupy movement. I mean, this is just classic Stalinism right on the streets of America.
That's right. It's right.
It's
but
amazing.
They didn't call themselves Stalinists. They didn't call themselves communists. They called themselves socialists.
No, but I mean, it really is a page right out of the Joseph Stalin textbook, man. Even Saul Alinsky can't get that read. It's just amazing to me. And there's nothing in the media, John, and I think this is what really infuriates people like myself. The media just glazes over it.
Well, the media is essentially controlled. You probably know something about the Council on Foreign Relations.
Oh, yes.
It's a private organization in New York City, and it has about 4,500 members. But of its 4,500 members, you will find presidential candidates, you will find corporation heads, you will find heads of the mass media, ABC, NBC, CNN, so forth. You will find academic leaders, the presidents of college, important professors, and right across the board, it's the creme de la creme of the United States. And these are the people that have control. The John Birch Society was formed as a new medium of information. What we intended to do was to bring people information that they're not getting from sources that they are encouraged to trust and to rely upon. And so, consequently, the John Birch Society was given the tar brush. We were labeled all kinds of nasty adjectives, and over the years, it hasn't added up. Nobody can prove any of the charges that have been laid at us. In fact, I've written a 40-page booklet called John Birch Society, Reality versus Myth. And I've gone into all of the charges that have been laid on the John Birch Society and showed how false they are. And in the process, tell you what the John Birch Society is really all about. What we're trying to do is to preserve the American system that was given by our founding fathers at great cost to themselves, some brave and far-seeing people that decided that government should be limited. And that's
well, people used to ask me, well, why do you get so worried about the immigration issues and blah, blah, blah? And I used to say, I don't have any problem with people immigrating to the country, but my family has blood on the soil,
Yeah, let's do it legally.
My family, my great-great-great-great-grandfather died at Andersonville, okay?
My goodness.
We have blood on the ground here. There was a hard-fought battle for freedom in this country. And a lot of people died. And, we talk about the greatest generation, the World War II generation, and they're dying off pretty fast now. But right, wrong, or indifferent, depending on your view with regard to how that war was made to involve America, the bottom line was that these folks went out and put their lives on the line to defend and protect what they thought was a free society.
And they had a declaration of war by the Congress of the United States according to the Constitution.
Yes.
War was declared. It was not declared in Korea. That war has never been settled. There's no shooting going on, but the war has never been settled. There was no declaration of war in Vietnam, none in Iraq, none in Afghanistan, none since right after Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. The Constitution of the United States is something that all of our officials swear an oath to abide by. Most of them immediately put it in the bottom drawer and go and do whatever they want. There has to be somebody telling the American people that this is wrong, that we shouldn't do these kinds of things, that we should obey the law, which is the Constitution. And that's what the John Birch Society was formed to do.
Yes.
Now, we've succeeded in many ways over the years. We haven't totally succeeded, that's obvious, but we're gaining ground, and we look forward to having many more people call us. Get a hold of us, jbs.org, or the John Birch Society, 1-800-JBS-USA-1. That's our phone number.
Yeah, 800-JBS-USA-1.
Correct. I finally remembered it.
There it is. Senior moment's over.
Senior
Now we start to ask the hard questions, John.
I'm a young man again.
We also, I think, have another great threat to the country right now, John. Along with these trade agreements that Mitt Romney seems to want to duplicate and grow and develop further. What about treaties, John?
Well, George Washington warned against entangling alignments with other nations. So did John Adams. So did Thomas Jefferson, and so forth. And the attitude was, let's have commercial relations with all and entangling alliances with none. And that's good sense back in the 1790s and into the early 1800s, and it's good sense today. We do not need a NAFTA to trade with Canada or to trade with Mexico. We do not need a free trade area of the Americas. You can look and see what they're really driving towards when you look over to Europe and you see the European Union, where 27 nations have given away their sovereignty to a bureaucratic entrenchment in Brussels, Belgium. It's absolute absurdity, and it's very, very dangerous. The EU is now having its problems, and there's a potential for it breaking up and ceasing to exist. I would applaud that very much. But the people who are promoting the same kind of thing here in the United States are saying what we have to do here is duplicate the European Union. And one of the things that they want to do right now, it's on a front burner again, is this North American Union. I can quote them. They've been very open about what they intend to do. And,
well, in the last year, we've had some pretty amazing shootings in this country. And every time we have one of these mass shootings, there's this clamor for this small arms treaty. And
yeah, they didn't go ahead with that. They didn't dare.
I just worry.
There were two shootings in Aurora, Colorado, in the recent year. One of them, of course, got all kinds of attention, and that's when the guy went in and shot up the movie theater and killed, 11, 12, 13 people. But there was another shooting, an attempt to do the same kind of thing in the same community of Aurora, Colorado, only several months before the one that we just referred to. And there was a fellow who was carrying his own weapon, and he stopped it by shooting the assailant. There was only one person killed by the assailant, and then he was stopped by somebody carrying a weapon.
I never even heard about this. Hang on a minute. We'll be right back with John McManus from the John Birch Society. I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host. It's Homeland Security Radio. Don't go away. You are listening to Homeland Security Radio. I'm Roger Fredinburg, your host. John McManus from the John Birch Society is here. I just want to say, next time you're out in public and you're watching, whether you're at a ball game or at the mall or in a restaurant, look around at the young people and notice what percentage of them are playing with their telephones. It's an amazing thing to watch. If you go out with a consciousness to look across these landscapes of humanity and watch the young people today, you'll find that 80 or 90% of them will be sitting around playing with their damn telephone. And I want you to remember what Albert Einstein said. I'm going to give you a quote of Einstein's here. Albert Einstein said, "I fear the day when the technology overlaps with our humanity. The world will only have a generation of idiots, and one of their kind will lead them." Enough said. John McManus, welcome back, sir. Yes.
Great quote.
It's so amazing.
Let me give you a favorite quote of mine, something I wrote, so I quote myself, right? America became great not because of what government did, but because of what government was prevented from doing.
That's absolutely true. I say amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
Man. Well, look, we're in a very...
The government of the United States would obey the Constitution. It would shrink to about 20% its size and 20% its cost.
Yeah.
There would be no Department of Education, Energy, Housing. There would be no foreign aid. There would be no undeclared wars that go on and on and on. Get back to the Constitution. It's still there. John Birch Society has been working very hard to protect it. Protect it from a constitutional convention that would see it destroyed if it ever happened.
Is it in the national interest of this country, John, to have troops after the armistice agreement in Korea is still there 60 years later?
No, bring them home. Bring them home from Japan. Bring them home from Korea. We have troops in 140 nations. There are 193 in the United Nations. I don't know how we missed out on 53 nations, but we did. Bring them home.
Well, don't give them any ideas.
Well, don't give them any ideas, right. I have a bumper sticker on my car. It says, get us out of the United Nations, and right underneath it says, bring the troops home.
Hallelujah. Well, do you think it'll ever happen? Is there a stomach in this country to do the right thing? I mean, what I see are these young kids, like, using that Einstein quote, I see these kids sitting around on their telephones, and they're usually fresh out of the piercing studio or the tattoo parlor.
Right, or college.
Have we just completely lost the country? Is there any,
No, not at all. I'm more encouraged these past couple of years than I have been for quite a while. I think a lot of credit goes to Congressman Ron Paul. I'm sorry that he's leaving Congress. He's decided not to run for re-election. He's going to be out of office as of December 31st this year. But he has awakened an awful lot of people, and most of them are young. It's a very good sign. I hope that they will sustain it. A lot of them have joined the Tea Parties and the 9/12 movements and the 10th Amendment Center and this and that and so forth. And we say, fine, good. Stay in those organizations. They're good organizations. But look into the Birch Society as well.
Yeah.
What happens is a lot of these people go to the meetings of the groups that I just mentioned, and they start asking questions, and there's usually a member of the Birch Society right there that said, well, I can get you some information on that, and so forth. And our influence in the John Birch Society has really ballooned in the last couple of years. It's a very good sign for America. Our membership is growing, not as fast as I'd like to see, but it's growing, and our influence has soared, and that's good. And that I can get on a radio show like yours and talk to your audience is something I'm very grateful for.
Well, I became pretty disgruntled, John. I got involved with a group out in Washington, D.C. with my radio show, the big radio show at night. Got connected with a bunch of the inside the Beltway people, and I just became so disillusioned when I realized how really weak these people are, how completely unwilling they are to do what they promised to do when they put their hand on that Bible and take an oath,
Yeah.
And
one of my good friends is a man named Edwin Vieira. He's an authority on the law. He's a lawyer. He's also an authority on the monetary systems. And Ed Vieira is the brother of Meredith Vieira, who used to be the co-anchor on the Today Show. And I asked Ed one time, I said, well, what's her position? He said, well, she doesn't really talk much about real issues. And I asked him, I said, well, you get together every once in a while? He said, yeah. And I asked her, I said, how come you never had Ron Paul on the Today Show? And she said, well, I wanted to do it. I very much wanted to have Ron Paul on the Today Show, but they scotched the idea from above and we couldn't do it.
Well, we're out of time, John McManus. Thank you very much.